Thunder's hooves struck dirt like gunshots as Cordelia Blackthorne pressed her back against the stable wall, watching 20 men scatter like tumbleweeds. The midnight stallion reared again, eyes wild with fury, sending another would-be cowboy. Diving over the fence rails, "The devil's gonna kill someone," Mayor Wickham shouted from his safe perch atop the water trough. Cordelia laughed, the sound cutting through the chaos like a whip crack. "Then maybe y'all should stop trying to break what can't be broken." She stepped forward, her emerald dress swishing against her boots, the only woman in Dustfall Creek who dared wear both silk and spurs. "I've told you boys 100 times, Thunder chooses his rider, not the other way around." Miss Blackthorne wheezed Doc Hartwell, dusting off his Sunday coat. "That beast nearly took my head clean off." "Your head was never in danger, Doc." "Your pride, however," she grinned wickedly as another cowpoke limped away, clutching his ribs. The stallion snorted, pawing the ground like he was keeping score. "Enough of this foolishness." Her father's voice boomed across the corral. Silas Blackthorne strode through the crowd, his silver beard bristling with authority. "Cordelia, get away from that animal. We're putting him down before he kills half the county, like hell you are." The words came out sharper than she intended, but she didn't care. Thunder had been her secret for 3 years, the only living thing that understood her wild heart. "That horse has more spirit than any 10 men in this town combined." Then Mary. "The damn horse?" shouted Jimmy Two Creek from the fence, earning nervous laughter from the crowd. Cordelia's eyes blazed. She climbed onto the fence rail, her voice carrying across the corral like a challenge thrown down at high noon. "You know what? Fine. I'll marry whoever can tame Thunder without breaking his spirit. No ropes, no whips, no force." She gestured. "At the magnificent beast still dancing with rage? Just you and him, honest as daylight." The crowd erupted in disbelief. Women gasped behind their fans while men exchanged incredulous looks. Cordelia Jane Blackthorne. Her father's face turned purple. "You will not. I'm 23 years old, Daddy, and I'll make any damn fool bet I please." She jumped down from the fence, landing with the grace of a wildcat. "Thunder's never been ridden because none of you understand him. The first man who can sit his back for more than 8 seconds without breaking his will gets my hand in marriage." "You're serious?" asked Reverend Mills, his Bible clutched to his chest like armor. "Dead serious." She pulled a pearl hairpin from her auburn curls and held it high. "My great-grandmother's pearl pin as proof of my word. Any man brave enough to try." The crowd fell silent, except for Thunder's snorting and the whisper of wind through the cottonwoods. 20 men had already failed, and now the stakes were higher than anyone had imagined. Then, from the back of the crowd, came a voice like distant thunder. "I'll try." The crowd parted like the Red Sea as he walked forward, tall as a pine tree, broad as a barn door, with hair black as midnight and eyes the color of storm clouds. Nobody had seen him arrive, and nobody knew his name, but he moved with the confidence of a man who'd never met a challenge he couldn't handle. "And you are?" Cordelia asked, though something deep in her chest fluttered like a caged bird trying to break free. "Doesn't matter." His voice was whiskey and smoke. "What matters is whether you'll keep your word." Thunder's ears pricked forward, and for the first time all day, the stallion stopped pawing the ground. The stranger's presence seemed to settle. Something in the air, like the calm before a summer storm. "Son," Mayor Wickham called out, "that horse has sent 20 good men to the Sawbones today. You sure you want to risk life and limb for a woman's foolish bet?" The stranger's eyes never left Cordelia's face. "Some things are worth the risk." Heat rose in her cheeks, but she lifted her chin defiantly. "Don't do me any favors, cowboy." "Made that bet to prove a point, not to trap some drifter into marriage." "What point was that?" "That Thunder can't be tamed by force. He's not broken because he's not meant to be broken. He's meant to be understood." She glanced at the stallion, who was now watching the stranger with curious intensity. "Most men in this town think power means domination. They're wrong. And what do you think power means?" The question caught her off guard. She studied his face, weathered by sun and wind, marked by experiences she couldn't imagine. There was something ancient in his eyes, like he'd seen more sunrises and sunsets than his years should allow. Partnership, she said finally. Real power comes from two strong spirits choosing to run together instead of one crushing the other. Nodded slowly, as if she'd just solved a riddle he'd been carrying for years. Then we understand each other. Without another word, he vaulted over the fence rails with fluid grace. The crowd held its collective breath as he walked toward Thunder, his hands empty, his movements slow and deliberate. Thunder reared once, testing this new challenger, but the stranger didn't flinch. Instead, he began to speak not loud enough for the crowd to hear, but Cordelia caught fragments carried on the wind. Words in a language she didn't recognize, ancient and melodic, like a song passed down through generations. The stallion's ears swiveled forward, his wild eyes focusing with laser intensity on the man approaching him. Step by step, the stranger closed the distance, his voice never wavering, his hands never reaching. "What's he saying?" whispered Doc Hartwell. Cordelia shook her head, mesmerized. Whatever language the stranger spoke, Thunder understood it. The stallion's breathing slowed, his muscles relaxed, and something impossible began to happen. The wildest horse in 3 counties started to listen. The stranger stopped 3 feet away from Thunder's nose. Horse and man regarded each other, like old friends meeting after a long journey. Then, in a voice barely above a whisper, but somehow audible to everyone present, the stranger spoke a single word: brother. Thunder lowered his great head and stepped forward, closing the distance between them. Without ceremony, without struggle, the stallion bent his neck and allowed the stranger to place one gentle hand on his muzzle. The crowd erupted in amazed murmurs. But Cordelia couldn't look away. She was watching something sacred, something that made her heart race and her hands tremble. This wasn't domination, this was communion. The stranger swung onto Thunder's back as easily as mounting a rocking chair. The stallion stood perfectly, still, as if he'd been waiting his whole life for this particular rider. 8 seconds, the stranger said quietly, his eyes finding Cordelia's across the corral. How long would you like me to stay up here? Cordelia's world tilted on its axis. The man sat Thunder's back like he belonged there, like they were two halves of the same wild spirit finally reunited. Around her, the crowd buzzed with excitement and disbelief, but she couldn't hear anything except the thundering of her own heartbeat. "Is ain't possible," muttered Buck Garrison, the best bronc rider in the county. "That horse is cursed, I tell you. Ain't natural for any animal to be that wild." And then ... this. "Hush up, Buck," snapped Martha Wickham. "Ain't nothing cursed about good horsemanship when you see it." But Cordelia knew this was something far beyond horsemanship. The stranger hadn't just tamed Thunder, he'd communicated with him in a language older than words. And now he sat waiting for her answer, patient as the mountains. While Thunder stood beneath him like a perfect black statue. "Well?" Her father's voice cut through her trance. "You made your full bet, Cordelia. A deal's a deal." She climbed over the fence and walked toward them, each step feeling like a choice that would echo through her entire life. Up close, she could see details that the distance had hidden: old scars along the stranger's hands, a silver pendant at his throat shaped like a running horse, eyes that held depths she couldn't fathom. "What's your name?" she asked, stopping just within reach of Thunder's outstretched muzzle. "Names have power," he said quietly. "Are you sure you want mine?" The question sent shivers down her spine. "I need to know who I'm promising to marry." Was quiet for a long moment, studying her face like he was memorizing it. Cale Nightwind. Nightwind. She'd never heard such a surname. "Where are you from?" "Everywhere and nowhere." He dismounted in one fluid motion, never taking his eyes off her. "Does it matter?" It should matter. A sensible woman would demand references, family history, prospects for the future. But Cordelia had never been accused of being sensible, and something about Cale Nightwind made her feel like sense was overrated anyway. "My father will want to know your intentions," she said, though her voice came out breathier than she intended. "My intentions?" Cale stepped closer, and she caught his scent leather and sage, and something wild like wind across open prairie. "I intend to honor the agreement you made, The question is whether you'll honor it too. Now see here, young man, her father interrupted, striding into the corral with his chest puffed out like a bantam rooster. Just because you manage some horse trick doesn't mean you can waltz in here and claim my daughter. What's your family name? Your profession? Your prospects? Cale's expression didn't change, but Thunder snorted and took a protective step closer. To his rider, Mr. Blackthorne, with respect, your daughter made her own terms. I met them fairly. Cordelia has always been too headstrong for her own good, Silas blustered. Surely you don't expect me to honor such a ridiculous daddy. Cordelia's voice carried a warning that made the whole crowd fall silent. I gave my word in front of the entire town. Are you suggesting I break it? The accusation hung in the air like smoke from a gunshot. In Dustfall Creek, a person's word was their bond. Everyone knew Silas. Blackthorne had raised his daughter to value honor above all else, even when that honor led her into trouble. There'll be a proper courtship, her father said finally. His jaw clenched tight enough to crack walnuts. I won't have folks saying I married my daughter off to the first drifter who wandered into town. How long? Cale asked. 3 months? That's enough time for us to learn who you really are, and for you to prove you can provide for a wife. Cordelia started to protest. 3 months felt like 3 lifetimes, but Cale nodded acceptance. 3 months. But I stay in town during that time. There's a room above the saloon, Mayor Wickham offered quickly, and Jenkins needs help at the livery stable. I'll work for my keep. Cale turned back to Cordelia, and when their eyes met, she felt that strange flutter in her chest. Again, 3 months to know each other properly. Will that suit you, Miss Blackthorne? She looked around at the crowd of familiar faces, people who'd watched her grow up, who'd clucked their tongues at her wild ways and predicted she'd never find a man brave enough to handle her spirit. Now they waited to see what she'd choose. Safety and propriety, or the unknown adventure standing before her with storm-colored eyes. It'll suit me just fine, Mr. Nightwind. She held out her hand, and when he took it, lightning seemed to pass between their skin. But I have some conditions. Of my own? Cale's fingers were calloused and warm, strong enough to handle wild horses, yet gentle enough to make her pulse race. Name your conditions. First, I want to know why Thunder responded to you like that. I've been working with him for 3 years, and I've never seen anything like what just happened. Fair enough. He released her hand, though she felt the absence of his touch immediately. What else? I want to know about your family, your past, where you learned to speak to horses in. Whatever language that was, a shadow crossed his face, gone so quickly she almost missed it. Some stories take time to tell properly. We have 3 months. Yes. He glanced at Thunder, who was now grazing peacefully as if the entire dramatic scene had never happened. We do. And third, she continued, ignoring the butterflies doing aerial tricks in her stomach, I want to understand why a man like you would agree to marry a complete stranger just because of a foolish bet. This time his smile was slow and devastating. Who says you're a complete stranger? Before she could ask what he meant, her father cleared his throat loudly. Enough of this circus. Cordelia, you'll come home now and prepare for a proper courtship. And you, Mr. Nightwind, will present yourself at our ranch tomorrow evening for Sunday dinner. 6 o'clock sharp. As the crowd began to disperse, chattering excitedly about the day's events, Cale moved to Thunder's side. The stallion immediately nuzzled his shoulder like an old friend. How do you do that? Cordelia asked, unable to hide her fascination. Animals see truth more clearly than people, he said, running his hand along Thunder's neck. They can't be fooled by words or appearances. They know what lives in your heart. And what lives in your heart? He looked at her then with such intensity that she felt exposed, as if he could see straight through to her soul. The same thing that lives in yours, I think. The need to run free. That night, Cordelia lay awake, staring at the ceiling of her childhood bedroom, her mind racing with questions and possibilities. Through her window, she could see the lights of town twinkling in the distance. And somewhere among them was Cale Nightwind, a man who'd appeared out of nowhere and changed everything with a single whispered word she'd always prided herself on. Being practical, on keeping her feet firmly planted on the ground, even when her spirit yearned to soar. But something about Cale made her want to throw caution to the wind and chase adventure wherever it is might lead. The next evening, she spent an hour choosing her dress knot, the emerald silk from the corral, but a simple blue cotton that brought out her eyes. She told herself it didn't matter what she wore, that this was just a formality. But her hands trembled as she pinned up her hair. Cale arrived precisely at 6, hat in hand, looking like a different man in clean clothes and a pressed shirt. But his eyes were the same storm gray, and when he smiled at her across the dining table, her heart did that fluttering thing again. "So, Mr. Nightwind," her father began over the roast beef, "tell us about your family." "I'm afraid there's not much to tell," Cale replied smoothly. "What?" "My parents died when I was young. I've been on my own most of my life." "Doing what kind of work?" "Horses mostly. Training, breeding, healing when they're hurt or broken." He glanced at Cordelia. "I've always believed that understanding comes before mastery." "In the language you spoke to Thunder?" she asked, leaning forward despite herself. "Cherokee, my grandmother was full-blooded. She taught me that horses are sacred animals, bridges between the earth and sky. They deserve respect, not domination." Father frowned. "Cherokee? That explains the unusual methods." Cordelia shot him a warning look. "I think it's beautiful."
The
way Thunder responded to you, it was like watching magic. "Not magic," Cale said quietly. "Just truth. Animals respond to authenticity. They know when someone sees them as equals rather than possessions." After dinner, they walked on the front porch while her father smoked his pipe and glowered at them. "Through the window. Tell me something," Cale said, leaning against the porch rail. "Why haven't you married before now? A woman like you must have had plenty of offers." Cordelia laughed, but there was no humor in it. "Men in this town want wives who'll stay quiet, cook their meals, and birth their children without complaint. They see my spirit as something to be tamed, like a wild horse that needs breaking, and you don't want to be broken. I'd rather die free than live in a cage, even a comfortable one." He was quiet for a long moment, studying the stars beginning to appear in the darkening sky. "What if I told you that wasn't the only choice?" "What do you mean? What if there was a third option? What if two people could be wild together?" The words hung between them like a promise and a challenge. Cordelia felt her breath catch as she studied his profile in the moonlight, the strong line of his jaw, the way the evening breeze ruffled his dark hair, the quiet intensity that seemed to radiate from him like heat from a forge. "That sounds dangerous," she said finally. "The best things usually are." He turned to face her fully, and she saw something in his eyes that made her pulse quicken. "Cordelia, I need you to know something before we go any further with this arrangement." "What?" "I didn't come to Dustfall Creek by accident. Came looking for you." The confession hit her like a lightning bolt. "What are you talking about? We've never met before today, haven't we?" He reached into his vest pocket and pulled out a small, worn photograph. "Look at this." She took the picture with trembling fingers. It showed a young woman who looked remarkably like her, standing beside a magnificent black stallion. The woman wore a traditional Cherokee dress, her dark hair braided with feathers, her eyes bright with the same wild spirit Cordelia recognized in her own mirror. "Who is this?" "My grandmother, Ayanna Nightwind." The photograph was taken in 1847. The year before, she was forced to leave her homeland. His voice carried old pain, old anger. She always said she'd know her granddaughter's kindred spirit when she found her, even if they weren't related by blood. Cordelia stared at the photograph, her mind reeling. The resemblance was uncanny, not just in appearance, but in the way the woman held herself, the defiant tilt of her chin, the connection with the horse beside her. "I still don't understand." "How did you know to find me here?" "Stories travel, especially stories about unusual women. Word reached me about a lady in Colorado Territory who could ride like the wind and had tamed a stallion nobody else could handle. Ayanna appeared to me in a dream and told me it was time. A time. For what? To fulfill a promise she made before she died? She said the spirits would send her a granddaughter of the heart, a woman with the soul of the wind, and when I found her, I was to offer her a choice." Cordelia's hands were shaking now. "What choice?" "To come with me to the place where horses run free, where the old ways still live, where spirits dance with the wind across endless grasslands. He stepped closer, his voice dropping to a whisper. She said I'd know the right woman because she'd be the only one brave enough to bet her heart on a wild horse. The front door creaked open, and her father's gruff voice cut through the moment. Cordelia, it's getting late. Time for Mr. Nightwind to head back to town. Cordelia couldn't move, couldn't speak. Everything she'd believed about her life, about the strange restlessness that had always plagued her, was shifting like sand beneath her feet. Where? She managed to whisper. Montana Territory? In the shadow of the Rockies, there's a valley where my grandmother's people found refuge. We preserved the old ways there, the connection between human and horse, the balance between civilization and wildness. His eyes searched hers. Will you at least consider it, Cordelia? Her father's voice was sharper now. I should go, Cale said, but he made no move to leave. Think about what I've told you. We have 2.5 months left. After he was gone, Cordelia sat on the porch steps clutching the photograph, her mind spinning with possibilities and fears. The woman in the picture seemed to be looking directly at her, as if trying to communicate across the decades. Could she really leave everything she'd ever known? Her father, despite his controlling ways, loved her. The ranch was her inheritance. Her security, Dustfall Creek, might be small and constraining, but it was home. But as she stared up at the star-scattered sky, she thought about Cale's words. What if two people could be wild together? For the first time in her life, she wasn't just dreaming about freedom, she was being offered it. The next morning brought unexpected visitors. A wagon rolled up to the ranch carrying 2 women Cordelia had never seen before. One elderly with silver-streaked hair and knowing eyes, the other younger with the bearing of someone accustomed to hard work and harder decisions. Miss Blackthorne. The older woman called as Cordelia emerged from the barn. I'm Naomi Clearwater, and this is my daughter. Ruth, we've come from the mountain settlement to speak with you about Cale Nightwind. Cordelia's heart skipped. Is something wrong? The contrary, Naomi said with a gentle smile. We've come to tell you about the choice you're facing, so you can make it with full knowledge of what's being offered. Ruth spoke up, her voice warm but serious. Cale is like a brother to us. He's been searching for you for 3 years, ever, since his grandmother's spirit told him about the woman who would complete his path. Complete his path? The Nightwind family are guardians, Naomi explained. For generations, they've protected the sacred bond between humans and horses, preserving the old knowledge. But the burden can't be carried alone forever. It needs to. Hearts, 2 spirits working as one. Cordelia felt the ground shifting beneath her again. And you think We think you're the woman who can make thunder respond to a whispered word, Ruth said simply. That's not a gift many people have. But how can you be sure? What if I'm not who you think I am? What if I can't live up to whatever expectations, child? Naomi interrupted gently. Do you know what Thunder's name was before Cale spoke to him yesterday? Cordelia shook her head. Storm's End. He was waiting for the storm in his heart to finally find peace. The revelation left Cordelia speechless. Storm's End, Thunder had been waiting, just as she had been waiting, though she'd never known for. What? Over the following weeks, Cale courted her with a patience that both charmed and frustrated her. He brought her wildflowers that grew nowhere near town, their petals still heavy with mountain dew. He told her stories of his grandmothers, people of horses that could run on clouds and warriors who spoke the language of wind. But he never pushed, never demanded an answer to the choice he'd laid before her. Instead, he worked at Jenkins' stable during the day and spent his evenings teaching her things that made her heart race with possibility. He showed her how to listen to a horse's breathing, how to read the messages in the tilt of an ear or the swish of a tail. Under his guidance, she discovered she could indeed communicate with horses in ways that went beyond words. You've always had the gift, he told her one evening, as they sat by the creek that ran through her father's land. You just needed someone to show you how to trust it. But what if I'm not ready? The question had been haunting her for days. What if I choose to come with you and then disappoint everyone? What if you choose to stay and disappoint yourself? His counter-question hit home. Every day that passed in Dustfall Creek felt more constraining, more like a beautiful prison. She watched other women her age settling into predictable lives, marriage, children, endless routines of cooking and cleaning and smiling when they didn't feel like smiling. It was a good life, but it wasn't her life. "Tell me about the valley," she said, leaning back against the cottonwood tree. "It's hidden in the mountains, protected by walls of stone and stands of aspen that turn gold in autumn. There's a lake so clear you can see straight to the bottom. It's fed by waterfalls that sing different songs depending on the season." His voice grew distant, as if he were seeing it in his mind. "But the horses, Cordelia, you've never seen anything like them. They run free. They're generations of bloodlines preserved from the time when the world was wider and wilder. And what would my role be? Whatever you choose to make it. Healer, trainer, storyteller, guardian. The settlement needs all kinds of skills, but most of all, it needs people who understand that some things are more important than comfort or convention." That night, she dreamed of running across endless grasslands on Thunder's back, the wind in her hair and Cale beside her on a horse that seemed to be made of starlight. She woke with tears on her cheeks, though she couldn't say whether they were from joy or sorrow. The next Sunday, over another dinner that felt more like a battlefield than a meal, her father finally voiced what had been brewing in his mind for weeks. "This nonsense has gone on long enough," he announced, setting down his fork with unnecessary force. "Cordelia, I've received an offer for your hand from Harold Pemberton. He's willing to overlook your ... eccentricities ... and offer a very generous settlement." Cordelia's blood turned to ice. Harold Pemberton was 50 years old, wealthy, and had buried 2 wives already under mysterious circumstances. "You can't be serious, dead serious. You're 23 years old, and this wild streak of yours needs to end before you become a laughingstock." "I've already accepted another proposal," she said quietly. "From a drifter with no prospects and wild stories about Cherokee magic. That's not a proposal, it's delusion." Cale, who had been silent throughout the exchange, finally spoke. "Mr. Blackthorne, with respect, your daughter is old enough to make her own choices. Not while she lives under my roof, she isn't." Silas stood up, his face purple with rage. "And you, sir, will pack your belongings and leave Dustfall Creek by sunrise, or I'll have the sheriff escort you out." The silence that followed was deafening. Cordelia felt the last chain binding her to her old life snap with an almost audible crack. "Then I won't be living under your roof anymore." She stood as well, her voice steady, despite the earthquake happening inside her chest. "Cale, how soon can we leave?" "Cordelia." Her father's voice was a roar of betrayal and fear. "Can't possibly." "I can, and I will." She turned to face him, this man who had raised her but never truly known her. "Daddy, I love you, but I can't live the life you've planned for me. No. It would kill everything that makes me who I am." "And what about the ranch?" "Your inheritance." "You'd throw it all away for some romantic fantasy? I'd trade it all for one day of living as my true self?" Cale rose slowly, his hand finding hers. "We can leave tomorrow, if you're certain." She looked around the dining room where she'd eaten thousands of meals, at the portrait of her mother hanging above the mantelpiece, at her father's face crumpling with the realization that he was losing her. The pain of it nearly changed her mind. "I'm certain," she whispered, then louder. "I'm certain." That night, she packed her few precious belongings, her mother's jewelry, some practical clothes, and the photograph Cale had shown her. As dawn broke over the mountains, she met him at the stables, where Thunder waited, saddled and ready for the journey. "No regrets?" Cale asked as she swung into Thunder's saddle. She looked back once at the ranch house where her father stood silhouetted in the doorway, watching his daughter ride toward a future he couldn't understand or control. "Only one," she said. "It took me so long to find the courage." The journey to Montana Territory took 2 weeks, following mountain trails that seemed to exist only when needed. Cale led them through passes that weren't on any map, along paths marked by stones stacked in patterns that spoke to those who knew how to read them. Each day carried them further from everything Cordelia had ever known and closer to something that felt like destiny. On the 10th day, as they crested a ridge that offered their first view of the hidden valley, Cordelia understood why Cale's people had chosen this place. The settlement nestled in a bowl of mountains like a jewel cupped in protective hands, with the promised lake gleaming silver in its center and vast meadows where horses moved like living poetry. "Welcome home," Cale said softly. The word home hit her with unexpected force. She'd lived in the same house for 23 years, but this place, this wild, beautiful sanctuary, felt more like home than anywhere she'd ever been. The people of the settlement welcomed her with warmth that transcended words. They were a mixture of Cherokee, white settlers who'd chosen a different path, and others who'd found their way to this hidden valley through their own journeys of discovery. What united them wasn't blood or history, but a shared understanding that some things mattered more than the approved ways of living. Naomi Clearwater became her teacher in the deeper mysteries of horse communication, showing her how to sense the emotions and memories that animals carried in their spirits. Ruth taught her the practical skills of mountain living, which plants healed, how to read weather and the behavior of birds, where to find the sweetest wild berries. But it was Cale who showed her the most important lesson of all: how to be wild. Without being alone, they were married on the autumn equinox. When the aspen leaves had turned to gold and the air carried the promise of snow, the ceremony was held beside the lake, with the entire settlement gathered in witness and a herd of horses grazing peacefully in the background. Instead of traditional vows, they spoke words in Cherokee and English, promises to run together, to honor each other's wildness, to be partners in the sacred work of preserving the old connections. When Cale whispered brother to Thunder during the ceremony, the stallion approached and nuzzled both of them, as if giving his blessing to their union. It was then that Cordelia fully understood what Naomi had meant about two spirits working as one. Winter came early that year, blanketing the valley in pristine snow and creating a world of crystalline beauty. Cordelia learned to love the long evenings by the fire. The elders told stories that kept the old wisdom alive, and Cale taught her songs his grandmother had sung. But she loved even more the bright mornings when they rode together across frozen meadows, their horses' breath making clouds in the sharp air, their spirits soaring free. Spring brought news from the outside world, a letter from her father, carried by a trader who knew the mountain roots. Silas had remarried, a widow from Denver who brought her own set of expectations and proprieties. He'd sold Thunder's corral and bought cattle instead, deciding that horses were too unpredictable for a proper ranch. The letter ended with an invitation to visit, if she ever tired of her adventure. Cordelia read it aloud to Cale as they sat beside the lake, watching their own horses Thunder and the silver mare. Cale had given her as a wedding gift, grazed contentedly at the water's edge. "Do you miss it?" he asked. "The life you left behind?" She considered the question seriously, because she owed him honesty in all things. "I miss my father sometimes. But I don't miss the cage, even if it was made of gold. And if you could go back, if you could have both worlds." "There are no both worlds," she said firmly. "There's the world where I pretend to be someone I'm not, and the world where I'm free to be everything I am. I choose freedom every single day." That summer, they received another kind of visitor, young woman who'd ridden alone from New Mexico territory, following stories about a place where wild hearts could find sanctuary. She was dusty, exhausted, and carrying the same desperate hope in her eyes that Cordelia remembered feeling not so long ago. "I heard there was a woman here who chose love over convention," the girl said. "Someone who proved it was possible to be wild and still find belonging." Cordelia looked at Cale, seeing her own memories reflected in his smile. The circle was continuing, the story spreading, the sanctuary growing to welcome new souls who needed what this valley offered. "What's your name?" she asked the young woman. "Esperanza Delgado, and I brought my horse." She gestured toward a paint mare who stood apart from the settlement's herd, ears alert and eyes wary. "Everyone says she's untrainable, but I think she's just waiting for someone to understand her." Cordelia walked toward the mare, feeling the familiar stirring of recognition, the call to help another wild spirit find its place in the world. Behind her, Cale's voice carried the echo of ancient wisdom. "Some things can't be tamed. They can only be loved." As the paint mare stepped forward to meet her, Cordelia smiled. The story was beginning again, as it always would, as long as their were wild hearts seeking freedom and the courage to claim it.